Well, we now have our day's closing note. The topic is, should AI have empathy? Relive this session on the role of empathy and emotional intelligence in designing inclusive technologies and deconstructing the biases encoded into AI. We have with us this evening Alan Trefler, CEO and founder, Pegasystems. Alan is a visionary leader, technology change agent, and innovative philanthropist and trusted advisor to global business executives. His unique technology vision and relentless focus on customer success is changing the way leading global enterprises engage with customers. Pleasure to have you here with us this evening. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Justin. Well, I'm Alan Trefler, the founder and CEO of Pegasystems, and I'm happy to be with you today to talk about AI and what it takes to both make it real and make it effective. Now, AI is everywhere. Everywhere we go, on our phones, on our computers, in the news, we hear about AI. We hear about what it can do, how it can work, how it can make our lives better, and how, frankly, it might be a little bit scary. And in reality, AI is going to change everything we do. Much as electricity changed the whole way people thought of the world, the whole way they thought of day and night, AI is going to change all of our interactions going forward. And it's going to change them in some ways that I think are understood and some ways that, well, may not be as well understood. And it's going to happen fast. But to make it work the way we want to make it work, particularly as people who are either technologists or people who are running businesses, we need to make sure that it's trustworthy, make sure that people think of it as a good thing, make sure that it's put into action so that not only do we say, hey, these systems are intelligent, we say they're doing things that are making our lives better. They're making us work smarter, more effectively, and more empathetically. And the reality is that when people say AI, they mean a vast number of things. I used to have myself a pretty rigid notion of what constituted artificial intelligence and AI. I'll tell you that my view of this has actually loosened up quite a bit because different people actually apply this moniker to different sort of things. You know, is it artificial? Well, ideally, it wouldn't feel artificial. Is it actionable? It better be. Does it make us smarter and more effective? Does it augment us as individuals? Do we accept what it does for us? Is it always on? Is it something that's helping us on a continuous basis? I've come to believe and realize that these are all elements of what it takes to have true AI. And in fact, what I would tell you is I've come to believe that AI is pretty much anything that makes the systems we're working with seem smarter, seem more effective, more personal. And that's a pretty broad area. But to be effective, it's not just sufficient to have something that seems smart. You actually need to be able to execute. You need to be able to create, not just a brain that can have opinions and make decisions. You need to be able to have the muscle to fulfill them. And if you actually really think about it, if you think about this metaphor of brain and muscle, what AI needs to be able to help us do is first decide what is the best action that we want to take, what is most appropriate, what can work in this circumstance, what will be effective. AI then needs to facilitate the execution of that action so that we can operationalize it. Because just knowing what an action is but not being able to take it isn't very useful. You need to be able to judge and measure the outcome because ultimately you want to be able to see if the results you expected were what you actually got. And then you need to be learning. You need to be able to learn from that outcome so you can create this virtual and virtuous cycle where you're constantly making decisions, executing, and growing and deepening the knowledge from them. And the results can be remarkable. Now, we see AI applying in lots of different scenarios. You can actually, for example, in some flavors of AI, by taking data and showing that data to the systems and reinforcing and helping those systems learn, get systems to recognize patterns incredibly effectively, both patterns that historically were very difficult for systems to be able to do, and patterns that humans would be able to do instantly, but that systems can now do extremely subtly and with great effectiveness. And this training, this style of machine learning, as it's referred to, is interesting because it really shows the power of technology, but it also provides a number of sort of cautionary elements where we need to be careful as we do this. Because it's not just that the machine is learning from everything, it's learning based on what human beings are feeding it, instructing it, and the rules that they may be giving to supplement the machine learning. And what we've learned, what we've seen, is that machine learning can be prejudiced. It can actually make decisions that are not constructive, that are not empathetic. And it's extremely important as we think about the application of AI to think about empathetic AI. How do we do this augmented, accepted AI that's not going to be subject to our biases as the people who program or provide it, but is also going to be able to actually, if it does have any prejudices, figure out how to rectify itself or how to adjust itself. This is a concept that we've spent quite a bit of time on, and we call it an ethical bias check. We talk about being able to check and see whether there are fields or data elements that you might feed in to the artificial intelligence that might be introducing biases that we know can exist, but we certainly don't want to bake in to our systems or our businesses or the ways that we operate. Things like, for example, bias based on gender or age or race or any of the other protected categories. It's very important and frankly, often not done to do this sort of double and triple checking and make sure that the AI that is being put into the marketplace and being used to represent a business does not have some accidental biases in it, which frankly are very easy to do if you're not doing this type of check. Because for AI to work, it's got to be a number of things. The AI that just sort of magically gives you an answer, well, that might be okay in certain circumstances, but that's not the way that people want to work and engage with systems. AI needs to be trustworthy. And to be trustworthy, it has to be transparent. You need to be able to explain it to a human audience and tell them why or how you came to an individual decision. Interestingly, in some countries, the law actually requires this for certain types of decisions to help evidence and to help prove that things were made on an equitable and empathetic basis. Empathy is critical because ultimately that has become the standard by which, people expect to engage in business with businesses, and companies know that they need to be able to do empathetic acts and work empathetically to be able to, support their clients in the way they want, and also to maintain and keep their clients. It's got to be accountable. You need to be able to record and understand the decisions. You need to be able to go back and demonstrate, to a customer base, to a regulator, to yourself, 2 years later, why and how certain decisions were made. Because it needs to be unbiased. you need to make sure that you're providing that ethical bias check across all the different groups that might be affected by this and might have an interest in these outcomes. So what does it mean to really have empathy, to put the customer at the center of how you're thinking? Well, what's interesting is what it means is, frankly, operating in a way that a lot of your customers, a lot of the people you'll work with, are skeptical about. Because if you look at it, most customers, when surveyed, when reviewed, when asked, don't actually believe that the organizations they deal with care about their needs. They don't believe it for companies. They don't believe it for governments. There's a high level of skepticism that exists. And that means that we need to go above and beyond to be able to do a great job, because there is so much that needs to be distilled and brought together that without smarter systems, without those augmented intelligence actions, it's almost impossible to understand how in the world today, let alone the more complex world that we keep heading towards, we will be able to truly meet the needs of customers and keep them, grow with them, make them feel good, turn them from that skeptical 2/3 to that third and more that believe we're operating in their best interest. So what do we need to do to be able to engage with Sarah, who we saw a moment ago, and figure out how we can make sure that we're bringing her the best that we can bring her, that we're not subjecting her to that horrible complexity, and that we'll understand what's going on? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to sense what's going on, right? Have we been working with Sarah? What did she just do? A lot of times people think of AI as something that's just crunched every night or in the background. But to really have effective AI, you need to be able to do it in real time. You need to be able to couple what you know about Sarah to actually include what she just did and what's going on and what happened. Did things just occur that are going to be important to her and are going to influence? You need to be able to interpret it and put together all of the elements so you can figure out what she's really trying to do. And you can figure out what would be valuable, what would be suitable, what would be relevant, and what would be understandable by her. You need to be able to not just do what Sarah wants, but ultimately you need to be able to do that in the context of an organization, of a business, and the rules and the standards and the objectives. You need to be able to figure out what the right thing is, not just from her perspective, which is the place to start, but also how does that marry up with what we want to do? And bringing all of those together is what enables an organization to be able to figure out what truly the next best action is. What is it that we would like to offer? What is it we would like to do? What would we like to recommend? What would be the ideal way to engage and to be able to help Sarah understand both what we can do for her and why that would be in her interest? We have the privilege of working with some incredible organizations that are applying this sort of sensing, this sort of immediate real-time responsiveness in their sort of day-to-day work. Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which is one of our clients that I think has a great sense of how they can be a part of the fabric of the country and how they can be not just the largest bank in Australia, used by almost everybody in Australia, actually, but how they can actually do a better job. And they've created what they call their customer engagement engine. This customer engagement engine, the CEE, is able to bring together the types of things that will make sense for their customers and put it in their hands, make it operate across all the different channels, available on mobile devices, available through the call center, available in person, through branches, available on actually 14 different channels, and be able to help them find what are the things that are most important in that moment to their clients and be able to recommend them, be able to make them work, be able to make that real. And being able to do these very pragmatic things, which are their top 20 of what they really do, but do it for the right customer in the right instant and do it, at the right time. That's, to my mind, the real application of AI, of real augmented intelligence. And the results of this have been tremendous. CBA has helped their clients, not just in working with them, but in finding resources that will help their clients, resources like unclaimed benefits, which they're able to help them with from the government, and finding those and helping their lives get better because they're understanding, anticipating, responding in the moment in exactly the right way. So how is it that organizations can work smarter? Well, ultimately, it starts with making the right decisions. But it's not just about making decisions, it's about execution. And it's about that loop we talked about, where you're both seeing how to make a good decision, you're actually operating and processing that decision to be able to get an outcome. And then from that outcome, you're not just recording your results, but you're learning from it. This idea of a self-optimizing company, that's the future of AI. It's about automation and it's about continuing optimization, making companies more effective. And when you look at how you think of applying data, applying knowledge, applying skills and expertise, we think it's super important that you think of all of these elements. Being able to sense, being able to get the value from your data, absolutely critical. Being able to drive outcomes or make decisions in real time so that you can use what that client just did, or you can incorporate the results of your most recent decision in what you do. And then being able to act, being able to actually drive the process. It's interesting because at Pega, we've thought for a long time that the ability to make good decisions and the ability then to execute them really were two sides of a single coin. They're really the two sides of how you need to engage with customers, how you need to make sure your organization becomes efficient. And this ability to both decide and act is what takes the data and the information and makes it not just actionable, but actually generates the outcomes you need. It's funny because in a lot of places, people will talk about data science and people will talk about process automation as if they are and should be separate things. We don't think that's true. We think that to be effective, you need to be able to bring together that brain and that muscle. You need to be able to make it so that organizations are smart, organizations make smart decisions with and for their clients. Organizations can execute those decisions. As they do the execution, they can continue to bring in additional decision criteria. They can tune and refine them. And then they have a virtuous cycle where the learning of how things actually turned out reinforces ongoing generations of decisions, ongoing optimization. That to us is what this is all about. And regardless of the type of technology you use in each of these criteria, it's absolutely critical, we think, that you think of these holistically, not just as individual technologies, right? It's not about speech to text or being able to read emails. It's not just about adaptive learning. It's not just about business rules. It's not just about being able to automate individual processes. It's about having these all operate in an ongoing and continuous manner. And in doing that, the real benefits accrue and real customer engagement happens. And that's what's key. Talking about Australia again for a moment, National Australia Bank actually has done a brilliant job on being able to change the whole way they engage with their customers over email by creating these software bots, these robots that are capable of reading and understanding and determining the intent in the emails. But that is not sufficient as a standalone exercise. It's got to be able to be put together with the other elements of what that organization is trying to do with the customer. It's got to be able to be put together with what we've done for that customer before. We've got to be able to decide what the outcomes we want are and how that intelligence is going to apply. And then we've got to be able to put it together into the process, into the execution environment that's going to make this great for the clients and make it so it's true AI, right? Augmented intelligence, not at all artificial, and ultimately empathetic, really operating in the interests of the client. So to conclude, to make AI live up to not just its full potential, but to make it acceptable to clients, you need to make sure that you're thinking about equity and empathy in what you do. You need to make sure that you're thinking about how you operate with clients on a one-to-one basis, including what's important to them, balancing it what's important to you, and making sure that you're using AI to create smarter, better, wiser outcomes. And with that, I will wrap up. The interesting thing I will say that the images in this presentation actually were all created by an amazing AI program called DALL-E, which from a simple description can go ahead and create images that look photorealistic and look as if they were either carved in stone or the people that you were seeing earlier were actually based off of a simple description to DALL-E. AI can be used for many things. Let's make sure that we're collectively using it for good. And with that, thank you, and let me turn this back to Justin.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing your views on such an interesting topic and for a perfect final session to close this summit with. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap this year's edition of NASSCOM Experience AI Summit 2022. We hope that all of you had an insightful and useful learning and established collaborations over the last 2 days of the summit.